He stood alone beneath the blinding glare of the terminal lights, cheeks burning as the cold hand of authority clamped around his satchel and yanked it away. Every polite, "Excuse me, sir," felt like a blade, cutting through the years he'd worn his gray hair and navy blazer with pride. His heart thundered in his chest as he watched the gate doors swing shut, each click echoing his shattered dignity. Strangers' eyes skimmed over him like he was nothing but a ghost, and in that crushing moment, he realized the world could erase your worth with a single swipe of a badge. Yet from the ashes of that humiliation would rise a reckoning more deafening than any roar of engines. Watch until the end to see how this incredible story unfolds, and let us know what time you're watching today. The airport terminal glowed in the pale light of early morning, its long windows streaked with the first thin rays of dawn. A cool draft carried the faint scent of brewing coffee and disinfectant down the wide concourse. The low murmur of travelers mingled with the steady whoosh of automated doors and the distant clang of rolling suitcases. Overhead, a voice crackled with boarding announcements, its tone measured and impersonal, as if reading from an unfeeling script. Every surface, shiny metal chairs, gleaming floors, glass panels, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day's drama to begin. Henry Caldwell moved slowly among the passengers, each step deliberate and weighed down by a lifetime of habit. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his navy blazer fit him loosely over a simple white shirt. A leather satchel hung at his side, its soft edges worn from years of handling. In his hand, he held a boarding pass, folded once and smoothed out so the numbers were clear. He paused beneath the large departure board, blinking against the glare as Flight 407 to New York flashed in bright letters. A small crease in his brow showed he was not as carefree as he seemed. He felt the ache in his left knee tug at him with every step, a reminder of the surgery he'd postponed 2 months ago. The roar of dozens of voices pressed on his ears, and he wished for his hearing aid, tucked safely in the satchel. A soft dizziness rose as he scanned the crowd. Hurried businessmen, excited families, solitary figures lost in their thoughts. His throat tightened. He was not used to this many strangers, all at once, yet there was a curious comfort in their shared purpose, each person drawn here by the promise of departure or return. As Henry edged toward a row of empty seats, a young mother with a restless toddler brushed past him. The child giggled and tugged at a worn teddy bear. Henry offered a gentle smile, and the mother thanked him for holding the door. In that brief exchange, his kindness shone through, a patient nod, a careful gesture to steady her stroller. He placed his satchel on the seat beside him and sat down slowly, adjusting to the cool touch of metal. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the laughter of the child and the hush of engines powering up beyond the glass. In his satchel, Henry carried more than a spare pair of reading glasses. A neat bundle of papers peeked from one pocket, tied with a thin red ribbon. He had prepared those documents for weeks, statements, contracts, and phone numbers scrawled in careful handwriting. To anyone watching, they might look like the work of a small investor or a cautious retiree. But Henry's eyes held a spark of something stronger, a resolve forged by years of quiet planning. He told himself he was simply on a family visit, but the papers were a heavier burden than a few greeting cards. Security lanes lay just beyond, guarded by crisp uniforms and watchful eyes. Henry sensed the tension here, an undercurrent of authority that could snap at any moment. He remembered how the guards had looked at him when he first arrived, an elderly man with no obvious status, easy to overlook or misplace. They had checked his tickets once, maybe twice, their expressions polite but distant, as though he were no different from the stray bag left on the conveyor belt. That slight brush with indifference stung him more than any harsh word could have. He opened his satchel and withdrew a small photograph in black and white, himself as a younger man standing beside a concrete plant, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with pride. He studied it for a heartbeat, the memory of construction dust and heat on his skin flooding back. That part of him felt far away now, the ambitious engineer who built roads and bridges. Yet somewhere deep inside, that same fire waited, He let the photo slip back into its pocket and took a steadying breath. The plane would leave in less than an hour. Soft footsteps approached, and a security officer in a navy jacket stopped at Henry's row. Henry's chest tightened. The guard's gaze flicked to the satchel, then back to Henry's lined face. "Sir, do you mind showing your carry-on?" she asked, her voice firm but not unkind. He nodded and set the bag on the floor between them. As she patted the sides, Henry watched her movements with calm attention. He had nothing to hide, no weapon, no forbidden object, only the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. When the check was done, the officer handed the satchel back and offered a brief, "Thank you, sir." Henry felt a flicker of relief as she walked away. He gathered the bag into his lap and took out his phone. The screen glowed with a single name saved under star, Rebecca. He thumbed her contact, but stopped before dialing. The voice in his mind whispered that now was not the moment. He slid the phone back under his papers, heart beating steadily against the quiet hum of the terminal. Around him, the world moved forward. Wheels rolled, announcements echoed, and passengers lined up at the gate entrance. Yet Henry sat alone, a calm center in the swirl of activity. His gaze lifted to the skylight, where pale light turned steel beams to gold for just a moment. He felt something shift inside him, the promise of change, the stirrings of a plan that would alter more than his own path. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. Somewhere beyond this hall, the next chapter of his life awaited, and with it, the collision of two very different worlds. The moment came just as the early sunlight turned glass and steel into molten gold. Henry Caldwell rose from his seat, satchel slung over one shoulder, and joined the steady line of passengers shuffling toward Gate 14. His knee complained with each step, a dull ache that reminded him he was not the man he used to be. Still, he held his chin high, his crisp shirt, tidy hair, and straight posture lending him the dignity of a man who knew exactly where he was going. He reached the front of the queue and offered his boarding pass to the attendant, a young woman with a tight bun and an unreadable expression. She scanned the barcode, frowned at her screen, then looked up at him with sudden hesitation. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice low, "please follow me." Henry's heart hiccuped. He had expected to board, find his seat by the window, and settle in with his papers neatly stacked on his tray table. Instead, he found himself stepping aside, away from the line of hopeful travelers, into a narrower corridor lined with frosted glass. His pulse quickened. This was not part of the plan. Behind him, murmurs rippled through the gate area, curious glances, whispered speculations. The attendant gestured to a door marked "Staff Only." Without another word, she slipped through, and Henry followed, each footstep echoing against the polished floor. The door swung shut, sealing off the bright concourse and tossing him into half-light and quiet tension. Inside, two uniformed officers stood by a small desk. One was the tall woman who had patted down his satchel earlier, the other a stern man with a clipped mustache. They exchanged a brief nod before focusing on Henry. The attendant stepped back, allowing them space. "Mr. Caldwell," the female officer said, her tone polite but businesslike, "we need to ask you a few questions." He managed a steady nod, though his breath hitched. "Of course." The mustached officer produced a tablet and tapped at the screen. "Sir, it appears there's an alert on your reservation. Something flagged by our security system. We'll need you to remain here until we clear it up." Henry felt a wave of cold settle around his shoulders. "An alert? I submitted my documents weeks ago." The woman officer glanced at her partner, then back to Henry. "May we see the contents of your satchel again?" He set it down carefully and unzipped the leather flap. As he pulled out his papers, the red ribbon fell aside, and she gently lifted the bundle, scanning the neat stacks of statements and contracts. "Helpful," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Then she closed the satchel and handed it back. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. You'll be free to board shortly." Henry exhaled, relief momentarily softening his features. He stepped forward to reclaim his bag, but At that instant, the mustached officer held up a hand. "I'm afraid not," he said. "We'll be holding on to this for now." He indicated the satchel. "Please wait here." "No," Henry said, surprise and indignation rising together. "I need those items, important documents." The officer's gaze was unmoved, almost mournful. "I'm sorry, sir, but until further notice, your bag will remain with us." Henry's chest tightened. A protest rose on his tongue, but the woman officer stepped in, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Mr. Caldwell, please understand, we're following protocol. You're free to go back to the terminal seating area. We'll contact you when this is resolved." He looked from her to the metal door beyond, where sunlight slipped in from a concourse. His vision tunneled, the world spun inward. He swallowed hard. "All right," he whispered. She nodded, and 2 minutes later, he found himself alone in a small holding area, the door clicking shut behind him. From beyond the frosted glass, he heard the faint whoosh of the automatic gates and the murmur of passengers boarding. A cold throb of humiliation and fear pulsed through him. His carefully planned morning had shattered in a few short moments. He sank onto a hard plastic bench and pressed his palms to his eyes. His breath came in ragged intervals. How could this be happening? He thought of Rebecca, his daughter, waiting for him at the other end. He thought of the contracts, the statements, the phone numbers scribbled with hope and care. All of it now lay locked behind that door. Time stretched. A faint beep drew his attention to the small digital clock mounted on the wall, 6:48 a.m. Reboarding should have begun at 6:45. His flight's departure time, 7:10. He had barely 20 minutes before the doors closed forever. Panic flickered, but he forced it back. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and ran a hand through his hair. He could not afford to break. He was a man accustomed to finding solutions. He drew in a slow breath and closed his eyes, summoning the calm he had worn like armor for decades. Then came the beep-beep behind him. The frosted glass slid open, and the woman officer reappeared, her face unreadable. She held out a slim card reader. "Mr. Caldwell, we're ready for you," she said. He rose, knees creaking. "Thank you." She stepped aside. He walked through the doorway and into a narrower hallway that led back toward the gate, only to find the boarding line gone. The gate attendant had already closed the barrier, her expression apologetic as she stared at an empty spot where his boarding pass would have scanned. "No, no," Henry muttered, pressing the reader against his palm. "Please." The attendant shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't let you on now. Management's orders." The color drained from Henry's face. "Management's orders?" he repeated, voice brittle. "Yes, sir. They instructed not to board you." He took a step forward, hand outstretched. "Who? Please, tell me who made that call." She glanced down, then back at him. "I'm just the gate agent. I don't have that information." An icy dread sank into Henry's gut. Something larger was at play. Hidden motives, the quiet machinery of power grinding against him. He pressed his jacket collar tighter, as though bracing himself against a storm. "I need those papers," he said, voice steadier than he felt. "Without them, I can't do what I came here to do." But the agent could only nod. "You'll have to talk to customer service." He turned away and walked back into the terminal, shoulders stiff. The concourse was alive with movement. Families greeting loved ones, business people striding with purpose, a chorus of footsteps and wheeled luggage. He felt like a ghost, invisible yet painfully exposed. His first thought was to call Rebecca. He pulled out his phone and tapped her name. But before he could press call, he stopped himself. Emotions tumbled. Fear, frustration, helplessness. He waited instead, pressing the phone to his chest and closing his eyes, listening to the distant click of boarding doors and the low hum of engines. He thought of betrayal. Who here had marked him? Who had set a trap? A flicker of memory resurfaced, the attendant's hesitation when scanning his pass, the officer's quiet exchange behind the door. He replayed each moment, searching for a clue, a glance that lingered, a word unspoken. His gaze fell on the glossy floor, where his reflection shimmered in fractured pieces. He saw an old man, vulnerable in his tailored suit, his satchel missing, his flight long departed. But behind those eyes, he saw something else: resolve. Years ago, in another life, he had built a concrete plant from scratch. He had faced obstacles then, too. He would find a way now. He rose and crossed the concourse, stepping into a quieter hallway lined with pillars. Away from the crowds, he could think. He fingered the band of his wristwatch, an old gift from a colleague. Time was slipping away, but he still had options. Above him, a digital directory listed lounges and customer service desks. He set his jaw and strode toward a muted sign: corporate customer relations. If anyone could answer his questions, it would be someone here. Each step carried the sting of eyes watching, security cameras tracking his progress, staff whispering as he passed. He imagined their thoughts. Who is this old man to demand answers? But he pushed on, welcoming the burn in his legs, the tension in his back. He would not be dismissed. When he reached the desk, a young man in a gray vest looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice polite but measured. "Mr. Caldwell," Henry said, sliding his phone across the counter. "I was removed from Flight 407. My boarding pass was invalidated. My carry-on is being held. I need to know why." The clerk glanced at the phone and then at Henry. "Let me check." He typed quickly, paused. His eyes darted to a line of text. "I see here a directive from corporate. You've been flagged for security clearance. We've been told not to assist you further until that clearance is complete." Clearance. Henry echoed, confusion and dread intermingling. "Who flagged me? On what grounds?" "I'm sorry, sir," the clerk said. "That's all I know." Henry closed his eyes. This was bigger than a misplaced boarding pass. Someone somewhere had used their power to stop him, and they would reveal their hand when it suited them. He turned away, chest tight with emotion, anger, disappointment, fear. But beneath it all flickered a stubborn light: defiance. He would not leave empty-handed, not after everything he had sacrificed. Somewhere in the heart of this sprawling airport, he would find his missing satchel, retrieve his papers, and press on with his plan. He stepped back into the concourse, merging with the tide of travelers, each unaware of the storm he carried inside. And as he walked, the first wisps of a promise began to form in his mind. An answer that would shake the world and reveal the hidden currents beneath its polished surface. Henry Caldwell found himself leaning against the cool marble wall of the airport lounge, arms crossed, watching the ebb and flow of travelers as though they were actors on a stage he didn't yet understand. The faint buzz of neon lights overhead mixed with the soft hiss of coffee machines in the corner cafe. He could still taste the metallic tang of frustration from his earlier confrontation at the customer relations desk. Everything he had planned this morning had been derailed, and yet in the pit of his stomach, something more unsettling roiled. The suspicion that someone close to him might have betrayed his trust. He closed his eyes and let himself remember a gentler time. He was 10 years younger then, sitting beside Rebecca Caldwell in a sunlit park near their home. Her laughter had rung like bells as she chased butterflies, and he had told her stories of great bridges that stretched across rivers, of machines as big as houses and men as proud as kings. He had been her hero then, but life had pulled them apart. Work demands, long hours, and a divorce that neither had wanted had left scars neither dared speak of. Now here in this terminal, years later, he longed to see her again, not as the stern board member of a major airline subsidiary, but as his little girl once more. A bell above the cafe door tinkled, and a young man in a gray vest appeared, carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs. Henry's gaze lifted to follow him. Greg Harrison, the customer relations clerk from earlier, set a cup in front of him and another before an empty chair. "I thought you might like a coffee," Greg said quietly. His dark eyes were open, honest, real. "On the house." Henry's chest tightened. He had expected more bureaucracy, more cold distance. "On the house?" he echoed. "Thank you, Greg. That's very kind of you." Greg shrugged, offering a rueful half-smile. "I slipped your file a note. The corporate line is tight, but not everyone here agrees with it. I'll keep an eye out, but from what I can tell, Your problem isn't with security, it's higher up. He lowered his voice. Someone in the boardroom sent that order. Henry set the mug down, surprise flickering in his eyes. A boardroom order? His mind raced. Rebecca sat on that board. Greg's gaze flicked away for a moment. I don't know names, but whoever called it could override everything on the ground. I'd watch your back, Mr. Caldwell. Not everyone in that tower is on your side. Henry nodded slowly, feeling both gratitude and apprehension. Here was a stranger risking his job to help him, yet Greg, who? A good soul, or someone with secrets of his own? He let his thoughts settle as he lifted the coffee to his lips. The warmth spread through him, steadying his nerves. He leaned forward. Greg, is there a quiet place where I could make a call? Somewhere off the record? Greg glanced around the lounge, then motioned toward a narrow corridor. Down there, first door on the right, it's a small office they use when agents need privacy. No cameras, at least not in the usual way. Henry finished his coffee in 2 long sips, then slid from his seat. He offered Greg a grateful nod. Thank you. You've done more than most. Greg watched him go, then turned back to restock the tray. Henry stepped into the small office and closed the door behind him. The room was unremarkable, a desk with a single lamp, 2 chairs, and a landline phone. He set his satchel carefully on the desk, still empty of its precious papers, and lifted the handset. For a moment, he hesitated, fingertips brushing the old rotary-style dial. Then he dialed a number drilled into his muscle memory. Caldwell, he said when the line clicked. Henry. The voice was calm, measured. Rebecca. He swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. Rebecca, it's me. There was a pause. Then, I know. He pressed his palm to the desk, bracing himself. Listen, sweetheart, something strange happened. They won't let me board flight 407. They've taken my satchel. Rebecca's voice caught, a flicker of concern and something unreadable mixed together. Your satchel? Why? I don't know. Security said corporate order. He glanced at the clock above the door, 7:23 a.m. His flight had left 13 minutes ago. I need to get to New York today. It's very important. Rebecca sighed softly. I'll see what I can do. Wait there, I'll call you back. Henry nodded, though she couldn't see him. Please, Rebecca, hurry. He hung up and exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Hope and dread tangled together. Had he truly reached her, or was he about to walk into another trap? Outside, the lounge remained busy, but here inside, time stretched. Henry sat in one of the chairs, closing his eyes again. He felt the weight of years, his failed marriage, missed birthdays, the ache of recognition that he'd pushed his daughter away in pursuit of career success. His ambition had built skyscrapers, but it had torn his family apart. Now, that same ambition was pushing him back into her orbit. He drew in a breath, willing himself to be steady. Meanwhile, just beyond the glass wall that separated the lounge from the concourse, Officer Maria Martinez stood with her back to the crowd, watching Henry's reflection. In the crisp blue of her uniform, she cut an authoritative figure. But her eyes were troubled. She had seen too many security clearances manipulated by corporate power plays. Wealthy clients, board members, even CEOs themselves, using their clout to twist routine checks into petty slights against rivals or inconvenient voices. She touched the badge pinned to her chest, a small reminder of why she did this job, keeping people safe, finding the truth. She slipped out of the crowd and entered the lounge, weaving past travelers toward the small office Greg had indicated. When she knocked lightly on the door and entered, Henry looked up, surprise flickering on his face. Officer Martinez, he greeted, voice cautious. I didn't expect you. She clasped her hands behind her back. I thought you might need help. Her eyes darted to the satchel on the desk, still locked in the protective case it had been placed in earlier. I can't retrieve it officially, but I can tell you what I know. Henry gestured to a seat. Please. She sat, folding her uniformed hands on her lap. The order came from upstairs, she said. I checked the logs. Someone at executive level flagged your name. Security was just following a digital instruction. No judge orders, no legal holds, just a button clicked. Henry felt anger flare. Why? I haven't done anything wrong. Maria sighed. I don't know what you're involved in, but corporate politics can be ruthless. They'll cut you off if you threaten their interests. Do you know who runs that airline's parent company? He shook his head. Only that they answer to a board of which my daughter is a member. Her eyes widened. Your daughter? Rebecca Caldwell? He nodded. She's on the board. Maria leaned forward. She's the one who sent the order. Henry's heart stuttered. Rebecca wouldn't. People do surprising things when they think they're protecting something, Maria said gently. But don't despair. There's always a way around digital blocks. I can't do it through official channels, but I know a guy in IT who owes me a favor. Henry studied her. Why help me? She met his gaze steadily. Because I believe you're innocent, and because I keep my promises. Back in the small office, Henry watched Maria's reflection in the dark window. He saw hope flicker there, and with it, a trembling vulnerability. He wasn't just fighting a corporate machine, he was fighting his own pride, his mistakes. And now his daughter was at the center of it all. He turned to Maria. If you can get me access to that server, I can retrieve my files and catch a later flight. But then I'll need to speak to Rebecca face to face. Maria nodded. I'll phone you tonight with details. Meet me in the staff lounge after hours. Henry swallowed. Thank you. She rose and slipped out, her footsteps silent. Henry reached for the satchel, fingers brushing the leather. He closed his hand in a firm grip. In that moment, the walls he'd built around his heart creaked. He had thought of family as a casualty of ambition. Now, he saw that ambition without family was empty. And as he waited, he vowed not only to reclaim his documents, but to reclaim the broken bond with his daughter, whatever it took. Outside, the concourse lights flickered as the morning rush gave way to midday lull. Henry stood, the weight of new alliances and looming betrayals settling around him. Act 2 had begun. Each step forward would force him to confront not just powerful corporate forces, but the choices he had made in the name of progress, and the daughter he had almost lost along the way. Henry Caldwell checked his watch again as he slipped through the narrow corridor leading to the staff lounge. The walls felt closer here, the hum of hidden air ducts louder. As if the building itself were whispering secrets he could almost hear. Earlier, Maria Martinez had told him to meet Greg Harrison here after hours, when the fast-paced crowd had thinned and the airport's underbelly came alive with muted conversations and furtive glances. Henry's heart pounded with anticipation. This was the moment he would recover his satchel and get back on track. And he told himself, perhaps begin the long-overdue healing with Rebecca. He pushed open the door and stepped into a small room lit by a single fluorescent bulb. A few empty chairs clustered around a low table. A battered sofa sagged against the far wall. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and worn carpet. Greg Harrison sat hunched over the table, his gray vest unbuttoned, tie loosened. He looked older in this light, dark circles under his eyes betraying late nights. When he saw Henry, relief and pride flickered across his face. Mr. Caldwell, he greeted softly, rising to shake Henry's hand. He offered a wan smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thank you for coming. Henry nodded. I appreciate you arranging this, Greg. He glanced around, wary of surveillance. Is it safe? Greg tapped the table with a quick flick of his fingers. I made sure. No cameras in here, and the door locks silently. We have privacy. He motioned to a chair. Please sit. Henry sat, smoothing his blazer to steady himself. Do you have my satchel? And my documents? Greg's smile tightened. I do. It was easier than I thought. Slipped past gold-plated digital locks, courtesy of a friend in IT. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a plain manila envelope. Here. Henry's pulse surged. He reached for it, paused, and then took it with care. Inside, he found a thick stack of papers. He touched the ribbon gently, feeling the smooth fibers under his fingertips. Relief swelled in his chest. Greg leaned forward. With these, you can catch the next flight. But there's more you need to know. Henry set the envelope on his lap and folded his hands around it. I'm listening. Greg hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting company. Rebecca isn't on your side, he said finally. She's the one who ordered your clearance hold. Henry felt a chill prick his skin. He already suspected it, but to hear it confirmed by Greg, who had urged him to call his daughter, was a blow. I know, he said quietly. She told me she'd help, then did exactly the opposite. Greg nodded sadly. She thinks you'll expose something that could hurt the board. Something big. She's protecting the company and herself. He pressed his lips together. She doesn't realize how far you've come. Henry swallowed. What are you saying, Greg? That things aren't what they seem. Greg's voice dropped. She's hiding more than a corporate secret. Last month, a whistleblower approached the board with evidence of financial irregularities, embezzlement on a massive scale. Rebecca was at that meeting. She knew exactly what was happening. And now she's scared. If you get those papers to the authorities, you'll blow the lid off everything. Henry's breath caught. He pictured Rebecca's calm face, her measured tone when she'd assured him, I know. Had that been pity? Or something colder, sharper? He clenched the envelope, feeling its weight grow heavier in his hands. Are you certain? Greg met his gaze. I was the one who brought the evidence to the whistleblower. I've been working inside the system for months, trying to gather proof. But the board covered it all up, everything except your investment statements. They're related. Your funds, your shares, they can trace the missing billions through companies you thought harmless. They want to stop you before you see the full picture. Henry closed his eyes, the fluorescent light blinking in his vision. Betrayal seeped through his limbs like ice. His own daughter, protecting a board that had stolen from shareholders? And Greg, was he a savior or another player in a deeper game? He opened his eyes. Why tell me this now? Because I trust you, Greg said, voice low. And because you deserve the chance to decide for yourself. You came here with good intentions, but they're using your trust to cover their tracks. Henry stared at Greg, searching for any flicker of deceit. He saw only weariness and remorse. What do you propose? Greg stood and moved to the window, peering out into the shadowed corridor beyond the door. You'll need proof beyond those documents. I can get you the whistleblower's dossier, transfer it to your phone. But that means we both become targets. Henry rose, clutching the envelope. I understand. He paused. Where is this dossier? In a secure server. I'll send a link. Greg pulled out his phone and tapped quickly, then turned the screen toward Henry. The message read, Download DWBX5HQ. Henry nodded. I'll get it. He glanced back at the door. How much time do we have? Not long, Greg answered. Security knows someone was here. They'll check in soon. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices this room is unlocked. Henry's chest tightened. The moment pulsed with urgency, fear, possibility. He drew in a slow breath. Send the link. Greg tapped again, then handed the phone to Henry. There. It's encrypted. When you open it, you'll see the full audit, the missing money trail, names, dates. Everything. Rebecca's name, too. Henry felt the weight of the phone in his palm, heavy with revelation. He felt as if he stood at the edge of a cliff. One step would cast him into a world he had never known. One step would break him free, or destroy him completely. He moved toward the table and set the manila envelope down. Then he opened his phone and tapped the link. The screen flickered, then scrolled lines of text too small to read at once. Balance sheets, transfer records, email exchanges. But one name caught his eye, Caldwell Investments. And beneath it, a series of transactions amounting to $4 billion routed through shell companies. Next to those, a series of board approvals, including RJC scrawled in elegant script. Rebecca Jane Caldwell. Henry's breath caught. He looked up at Greg, whose face was calm but tense. She took it all, Henry whispered. $4 billion. Greg nodded. She thought no one would notice, because she's your daughter. She believed you'd trust her completely. Henry staggered back from the table, eyes brimming. How could she? Greg's gaze was steady. She was under pressure. The company's survival was at stake, she told herself. But in doing so, she betrayed everything you taught her: honesty, integrity. Henry pressed a hand to his chest. His world tilted. The daughter he had once doted on, the little girl who chased butterflies, she had grown into a corporate wolf, using his name to launder billions. And Greg, his ally, had orchestrated this moment to shatter him. He stepped away from the table, loose papers fluttering under his feet like wounded birds. His voice cracked. "I need to speak to her." Greg closed his eyes briefly. "She's on a flight to Zurich. She left hours ago." Henry's breath hitched. "Zurich? Why?" "To finalize the transactions," Greg said softly. "She accepted a deal from board members to clean up her mess, pay back part of what she took, and walk away with the rest. She's gone where no one can reach her easily." Henry's knees weakened. The train of his life had derailed, carrying him into a landscape he did not recognize. He closed his eyes, tasting the tang of betrayal on his tongue. A part of him wanted to collapse, to give in to grief. But another part, the part that had built bridges and plants with calloused hands, flared with anger and resolve. He straightened, shoulders square. "Then I'll go to Zurich." Greg's eyes widened. "You can't." Henry cut him off. "I will." His voice was steady now, clear. "She's my daughter. I'll face her, and I'll make her answer for this." Greg exhaled, a mix of admiration and fear. "You're willing to risk everything for her?" Henry nodded. "She's still my daughter." He swept a hand toward the door. "Let's go." As they moved to leave, Greg paused, gripping Henry's arm. "One more thing," he said in a low voice. "Maria Martinez, she's on our side. But you must be careful. Others in security are loyal to the board. They'll come after you if they discover what you've uncovered." Henry met Greg's gaze. "Then I'll move quickly." He felt the familiar ache in his knee, the cold sweat on his palms, the steady thrum of purpose in his chest. He stepped into the corridor with Greg at his side, carrying the weight of a father's love, a traitor's debt, and a journey that would take him across borders and betrayals alike. And as the door whispered closed behind them, Henry Caldwell realized that the world he had known was gone. Act 2 had turned, twisting him into a new shape, one forged by loss, betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. Henry Caldwell and Greg Harrison moved swiftly through the cavernous terminal, the late-day sun casting long shadows across the polished floor. Every footstep felt heavy with urgency, the weight of forbidden knowledge pressing down like a storm cloud. Behind them, security cameras followed their progress, their lenses cold and unyielding. Henry's knee ached fiercely, each twinge a reminder of his vulnerability. But he refused to slow, driven by a fierce need to reach Zurich and confront Rebecca. They reached the gate for Flight 612, bound first for Frankfurt. Greg swept his tie into place and offered Henry a tense smile. "I've arranged everything. You'll board as Gregory Clark, an alias I've set up with IT." He handed Henry a passport and boarding pass. The name felt strange on Henry's tongue, but he didn't question it. "You'll use my face in their database. No one will think twice." Henry patted Greg's shoulder. "Thank you. I owe you more than I can say." He tucked the false passport into his blazer and swallowed back the lump in his throat. He thought of Rebecca, his daughter, the one who had both betrayed and terrified him. If this disguise worked, he would cross continents to face her. If it failed, he dare not think. At the security checkpoint, the line crept forward with agonizing slowness. Officers scanned carry-ons, their expressions neutral masks. Henry's heart pounded as he placed Greg's documents on the conveyor belt. A young agent raised an eyebrow at the passport photo. Greg's familiar face on Henry's body looked subtly off, but the computer beeped green, and the agent waved him through. Henry let out a silent prayer of thanks. Greg followed behind, his own face hidden by a fedora tilted low. That was each step brought Henry closer to his goal, and yet he felt the tension coil inside him like a live wire. He could feel his pulse in his temples, hear the rush of blood in his ears. He tried to steady himself, drawing in long breaths of recycled air. At the gate entrance, a hesitation. A uniformed officer stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Clark?" Her tone polite but probing. "Please present your boarding documents." Henry offered Greg's pass with a practiced smile. The officer scanned it, then peered at his face. Their eyes met for a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity. Then the machine beeped. "All set. Have a good flight." Relief washed through him like warm water. He followed Greg up the jet bridge, every nerve on edge. Once inside the cabin, he found his seat by the window and dropped into it with a groan of relief. He loosened his jacket and reached into his pocket for the envelope Greg had given him. The red ribbon still held the pages tight, but beneath it lay the truth of $4 billion and Rebecca's name stained across the balance sheets. He ran a finger across her signature, R.J. Caldwell. His heart twisted. He thought of the little girl he had taught to ride a bike, the college graduation where he'd cried at her speech. How had she become an architect of corporate greed? A betrayal so deep it cut him to the bone. The engines hummed as the flight attendant prepared for takeoff. The safety demonstration felt like ceremony, each spoken word undercut by his racing thoughts. When the plane lurched forward, Henry closed his eyes and imagined a bridge spanning a roaring river. Bridges required strong foundations, he had always believed. And here he was building the weakest one of all, trying to span the chasm between a father and his daughter. Mid-flight, Greg leaned over the seat. "I sent the dossier to your email. It's encrypted, but the password is your birthday, June 12, 1951. He tapped his own chest. "Like always, I trust you'll keep it safe." Henry nodded and drew out his phone. The email appeared, a single PDF attachment. He typed in his birthday and watched the pages load. Charts, transaction records, email threads between Rebecca and the board chairman. Every line confirmed what Greg had said, that Rebecca had orchestrated the embezzlement to shore up the company's faltering stock price. The knowledge made Henry's blood run cold. A soft chime drew his gaze. Maria Martinez's name flashed on his screen. He tapped the call icon with trembling fingers. "Maria." "Henry," her voice came low but urgent. "We have a problem. Security flagged Greg on your arrival. They're bringing him down to investigations. You need to decide. Stay on your path to Zurich or help him now." Henry's throat tightened. Greg was the only ally he had in this hostile environment. Without him, his plans might collapse. But stopping the plane here would alert everyone. "Tell me where they're taking him," he said. "Concourse C, holding cell A2. I can meet you there when you land in Frankfurt, but you must go directly." Henry pressed his eyes shut, caught between loyalty and purpose. He pictured Greg's hopeful face as he handed over the alias passport. He owed this man his life. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do both." He set the phone down, heart thundering. "Greg, I need your help again. When we land, you'll—" Greg's eyes widened in shock. "They're already coming for me, Henry. I don't know if we can." The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our descent into Frankfurt in 10 minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Henry nodded. "Hold on," he whispered to Greg, who gave him a curt nod back. Henry tightened his belt, feeling the plane's wings dip as they entered clouds. In that moment, he realized there would be no straight path to Zurich, only a winding road of risks and sacrifices. The plane touched down with a gentle thud. Passengers gathered their belongings, stepping over carry-ons with vague impatience. Henry moved through the cabin, heart-hammering. He allowed Greg to exit first, then followed, sealing his resolve. Whatever it took, he would not betray this man again. In the terminal, the bright lights felt harsh, the crowd stifling. Henry swallowed and followed Greg's lead across the hall. They reached Concourse C as promised, where a pair of officers stood by a metal door marked "Holding." Greg's face paled. "Here," he whispered. Maria stepped out from a side corridor, her uniform replaced by plain clothes and a baseball cap. She glanced left and right, then signaled them into a small alcove. "They'll take him soon," she said. "We have less than 5 minutes before they lock him away." Henry's mind raced. What can we do? Maria pressed a slim envelope into his hand. Make this look official. It authorizes his release for further questioning. Use Greg's alias. It'll buy you 10 minutes. Then you need to get on the next train to Zurich. She paused. Are you ready? Henry looked at Greg, whose eyes reflected both fear and trust. Yes, Henry said softly. He felt the ache of betrayal in his chest. Betrayal by Rebecca, by a system he once believed in. Now he worked within that system to save a friend and find the truth. Let's do it. They approached the officers. Henry cleared his throat, voice steady. Officers, Gregory Clark, please release this individual for secondary questioning. He handed over the envelope. The officers exchanged a glance, then the lead man scanned the document. Everything seems in order, he said. Take him through. He stepped aside. Greg exhaled, relief flooding his face. Henry clapped him on the shoulder. Come on. They hurried through the door and into the corridor beyond. Maria touched Henry's arm. Go. I'll cover you. She slipped away as they turned a corner. Henry and Greg raced toward the airport train station, weaving past barred escalators and empty cafes. He clutched the envelope, their lifeline, and the phone with the dossier still open. Every second felt precious. The path to Zurich lay ahead, strewn with obstacles and lies. Yet with each hurried step, Henry felt the old fire rekindling, the engineer who built bridges, determined to span any gap, overcome any chasm. His daughter waited on the other side, and he would meet her, come what may. As they boarded the train to Frankfurt's main station, Henry pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the steady thrum of purpose and dread mingled together. In his pocket, Rebecca's name glowed on every page, a haunting reminder of what he sought, not just justice, but a chance at redemption for both of them. The train lurched forward, carrying him into Act 3 and the challenges that lay beyond. The moment of reckoning came on a rain-slicked street in Zurich, outside the glowing facade of the Grand Continental Hotel. Street lamps cast trembling halos on puddles, and the late-night wind carried the distant roll of trams along quiet avenues. Henry Caldwell, his coat collar turned up against a chill, stood beneath an awning, clutching the manila envelope and his phone, its screen glowing with the dossier's damning figures. Greg Harrison paced beside him, every bit as anxious and determined as Henry felt. Somewhere inside, Rebecca Caldwell waited. Her world balanced on the edge of truth and ruin. They slipped through the hotel's revolving doors into a marble lobby where a grand chandelier spilled soft light across polished floors. Rebecca's name was already being whispered among the few guests still lingering at the bar. Henry felt his chest tighten at the thought of stepping into her orbit once more, as her father, yes, but now as accuser and avenger. He glanced at Greg. Ready? Greg gave a curt nod. Together, they ascended in a quiet elevator to the top-floor suite Rebecca had booked under her own name. The suite door swung open before they reached the fourth knock. Rebecca stood in the center of the foyer, her tailored charcoal suit crisp, her hair pulled back in the familiar braid Henry had once braided himself when she was little. Her eyes, so like his own, flickered with shock, pain, and something fierce that he did not recognize at first. "Father," she said, voice taut. "What? How did you?" "I know what you've done, Rebecca," Henry said softly, stepping into the room. The suite's lights bathed them in a harsh glow, crystal vases on glass tables, abstract paintings on ivory walls, the trappings of wealth. He laid the envelope on a low table, so the papers spilled open, red ribbon caught beneath a corner of the top sheet. $4 billion. Your signature on every last transfer. Rebecca's face went pale and then flushed with anger. She pulled the dossier email open on Henry's phone and scrolled through balance sheets and board minutes. This isn't how you think it is," she whispered, voice cracking. "I did it to save the company, to save our legacy. We were on the brink." "You made your own brink," Henry interrupted, voice quiet. He felt blood pounding in his ears, the ache in his knee forgotten. "Why, Rebecca? Why not come to me?" Her shoulders collapsed, vulnerability flaring in her eyes. I was afraid that you'd see the company fail, see your life's work crumble. I thought I could fix it alone, rebuild value before anyone noticed. She ran a hand through her hair, as she had done when deep in thought as a child. I never meant to hurt you. Henry studied her, memories flooding him, the park bench, her laughter, the college speech she had written about honesty and vision. You meant to hurt everyone, he said, voice wavering. Investors, employees who trusted you, and me. He closed his eyes, struggling to steady his breath. But I love you, Rebecca. I always have. You needed help, but you turned away instead. Tears brimmed in her eyes. She reached for his hand, trembling. Father, please, help me make this right. I'll return every cent. I'll face the board. I'll resign. I need you with me. At that moment, Greg cleared his throat. He carried a tablet with a prepared video call to the airline's board chairman. I've set up a call, he said quietly. They're on the line now. Henry nodded, proud of Greg's calm efficiency. Rebecca took the tablet, pressing away to connect the call. Her voice regained strength. Chairman Anders, I confess to orchestrating those transfers. Here is the full audit. She slid the tablet toward Henry. He rifled through the documents as the chairman's stern face filled the screen. I'm prepared to step down immediately, return the assets, and cooperate fully with any investigation. Silence stretched as the chairman processed her words. Then his voice, cold but not unkind. Ms. Caldwell, your actions constitute a grave breach of trust. Yet your willingness to confess and remedy the damage is noted. We will convene an emergency board session at dawn. I expect you and your father to attend. Rebecca exhaled, relief and fear mingling. Thank you, she said softly. She turned to Henry. We'll face them together. Henry rose, placing a hand on her shoulder. He looked around the suite. The elegant furnishings now felt hollow. Come dawn, he said, we'll show them what honesty looks like. He met her gaze. I will stand by you, Rebecca, because that's what fathers do. Outside, the storm had eased. The rain had tapered to a soft patter against the windows. Inside, the storm between father and daughter had broken. But now they faced a new one, the corporate tribunal that would decide Rebecca's fate. Yet in that suite, beneath the chandeliers and the city lights, something fragile had been rebuilt, their bond. When dawn's first light painted the sky in pale lavender, Henry and Rebecca entered the boardroom side by side. The tables stretched before them, filled with corporate titans and lined with expectant faces. Rebecca's resignation letter lay beside the audit report, its pages a testament to courage and contrition. Henry stood behind her, silent strength embodied. The chairman opened the session with measured words. Ms. Caldwell, you have faced us under extraordinary circumstances. Your father, Mr. Caldwell, has traveled across continents to stand with you. Before we deliberate, would you like to speak? Rebecca inhaled deeply, her voice steady. Board members, shareholders, and colleagues, I betrayed your trust. My fear led me to make decisions that nearly destroyed everything we built. I am deeply sorry. I hand over the full audit, I resign my position, and I will work with authorities to return every misallocated dollar. She paused, turning to Henry. Father taught me that integrity is the foundation that holds every bridge, every company, every relationship together. I lost sight of that. I hope you can forgive me and allow me to help rebuild. Silence reigned. Then the chairman nodded. Your honesty is the first step to repair. We accept your resignation and your offer of restitution. You and Mr. Caldwell may remain for any questions. He tapped the gavel lightly. As the board began its inquiries, Henry watched his daughter respond with clarity and remorse. Each answer knit a new strand of trust. Outside the windows, Zurich's rooftops glistened in morning light, a world renewed. Henry felt a quiet pride and a sorrow for the cost. But more than anything, he felt hope. Later, as they left the boardroom and walked through the hotel's sunlit lobby, Rebecca slipped her hand into Henry's. He spared a glance for Greg, who stood by the revolving doors with a faint, satisfied smile. Then Henry looked to his daughter. "You did well," he said. "I'm proud of you." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." They stepped out into the street together. The rain had stopped. The city was waking in golden light. Henry breathed in the crisp air, feeling the weight of the man he once was and the man he had become. His satchel lay forgotten in his hotel room, a symbol of ambition and plans that changed. Now his compass pointed home, toward family and the hard-won truth. And as father and daughter turned toward the tram stop, their shadows stretching before them in the morning sun, Henry thought of bridges, how they fall, how they mend, and how they carry us from one world to the next. In the end, it was love and honesty, those simple, unbreakable planks, that held the span. Henry and Rebecca left the hotel hand in hand, stepping into the gentle warmth of the Zurich morning. The rain had cleared, leaving the sidewalks clean and bright, and the street lamps still flickered faintly as if waving farewell. They neither spoke nor hurried, content to walk side by side, letting the hush of the city fill the space between them. At a small cafe, Terrace, they paused and ordered 2 steaming coffees. Henry watched Rebecca stir sugar into her cup, the fine crystals dissolving slowly, and he felt a quiet pride in her. She met his gaze, and in that moment they both understood how fragile and precious forgiveness could be. They settled at a corner table beneath an awning, the aroma of fresh bread and espresso swirling around them. Rebecca reached into her bag and withdrew a neatly printed statement, a plan to return every misallocated penny, complete with timelines and names of auditors and trustees. She laid it before him. "This is the road I'll walk, Father," she said softly. "I'll make amends piece by piece." Her voice was steady, but Henry sensed the effort it took for her to admit guilt so openly. He nodded, his heart both heavy and hopeful. "I believe in you," he said, "and I'll help however I can." As they talked through the details, accounting firms to hire, press releases to prepare, legal teams to consult, the weight of the past week seemed to lift. Each plan item was a brick in the bridge they were rebuilding. Rebecca confessed her fear, how she had thought secrecy might protect them both, only to trap her in deeper lies. Henry shared his regret, how his single-minded focus on work and pride had driven a wedge between them. They spoke honestly, their words gentle but unafraid, and with every admission, the bond they had once lost grew stronger. Later that day, they met Greg Harrison and Maria Martinez at the airport lounge, the site of so many turning points in their journey. Greg offered a shy smile as Rebecca approached. "I'm proud of you," he said, and she thanked him with tears in her eyes. Maria, in plain clothes now, hugged Henry briefly, her usual reserve giving way to genuine warmth. They spoke of next steps. Greg would testify before regulators about the board's cover-up, and Maria would oversee the secure handover of funds back to the company. In that circle, father, daughter, friend, protector, they formed a new alliance built on trust and shared purpose. As Rebecca and Henry boarded the train home, the last of the Alpine peaks rose like ivory sentinels against a sapphire sky. Henry pressed Rebecca's hand, his mind turning over the lessons of what had happened. He thought of ambition's lure, how easy it is to bend principles under the weight of fear. He recalled his own career, the long nights at the concrete plant, the patents and blueprints he had pursued with unyielding drive. He realized that in chasing tomorrow's achievements, he had underestimated the cost to today's relationships. Now, as the train carried them across green fields and quiet villages, he felt a deep resolve to balance his work with the people he loved. When they stepped off at their hometown station, dusk had settled in golden hues. Henry hailed a cab, and Rebecca sat beside him, sliding her hand into his. The city lights shimmered on the wet streets, and Henry marveled at how looking at the world through clear eyes could make even familiar scenes seem new. He imagined the many small choices ahead, lunch with Rebecca, morning walks by the lake, evenings spent sharing stories instead of spreadsheets. He felt a tremor of excitement at the prospect. At home, they unpacked in near silence. Rebecca paused by a photograph on the mantel, her as a child, perched on Henry's shoulders, both beaming with joy. She touched the frame and turned to him. "Do you remember that day?" she asked. He did. A sunny afternoon in the apple orchard, laughter drifting like petals in the breeze. He nodded. "I remember." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for never giving up on me." He wrapped his arms around her. "I never will." That evening, they sat by the fireplace with mugs of tea, the crackle of flames punctuating their comfortable silence. Henry's thoughts drifted to the moral weight of their journey. He knew that power and money could corrupt even the most well-meaning soul. He understood now that transparency and accountability were not just corporate buzzwords, but lifelines for every relationship, whether between CEO and investor, parent and child, or citizen and community. He looked at Rebecca, whose eyes mirrored his own newfound clarity, and he felt that they had both emerged stronger for having faced the truth. As the fire dwindled and the room grew quiet, Henry rose to fetch a blanket. He paused in the doorway, gazing at his daughter asleep on the sofa, her head on a cushion, the dossier and restitution plan laid out on the coffee table like broken promises waiting to be remade. He wondered how one moment of courage, hers, had reshaped so many lives. He knelt beside her and brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead, the same gesture he had made when she was small and afraid of storms. "Sleep well, Rebecca," he whispered. "Tomorrow we rebuild." In the stillness that followed, Henry returned to his armchair, pulled a journal from the shelf, and wrote a single line. "Integrity outlasts ambition." He laid the pen down and closed his eyes, a sense of peace settling over him. Outside, the world turned on, filled with both dangers and possibilities. But here, in this quiet room, a father and daughter had found a path forward. One lit by honesty, forgiveness, and the simple, unwavering belief that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.